This is a CBC podcast. When a story makes headlines in Canada or around the world, CBC Radio goes deeper and takes you to the heart of what's really going on. Now, with story alerts delivered right to your inbox, you'll be the first to hear exclusive interviews, thoughtful analysis, and unique insight on major events. Sign up for CBC Radio Story Alerts at cbc.ca/subscriptions.
As you have been hearing in the news, a BC couple who found a surrogate mother in Mexico through a paid clinic is having a harrowing time trying to get their twins back to Canada and into BC's Children's Hospital. Greg and Elaine Smith from Maple Ridge had been trying to conceive a child for years, but earlier this month, Aiden and Ariana were born prematurely at 31 weeks in Mexico. They weighed just 3 pounds each and were in critical condition. Greg's aunt, Linda Pruden, spoke to CBC Radio this morning about how they're doing.
They're so stressed out over everything that's happening that it's all just surreal to them. They're just waiting. They've received 2, in the middle of the night calls regarding Ariana that, they best come to the hospital quickly, that they don't think that she's going to make it. And so, they're always waiting for the next phone call. So, no, I don't think they're sleeping or eating. They're just hanging on by a thread.
That is Linda Pruden, Greg Smith's aunt. And we want to hear from you. Would you consider using a surrogate mother to have a child? Would you consider being a surrogate mother yourself? What concerns do you have about surrogacy in general? Call us around the province. The number toll-free, 1-800-825-5950. In the Lower Mainland, the number is 604-669-3733. On your cell phone, it's star or pound 690. You can tweet us at BC Almanac. In just a few minutes, we're going to hear about some of the challenges for queer parents. But first, Sara Cohen is a surrogacy lawyer and a partner at Fertility Law Canada. She joins us now on the line from Toronto. Good afternoon to you, Sara.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us. So, what went through your mind when you heard about Greg and Elaine Smith's misfortunes with their surrogate mother in Mexico?
Well, probably just like everyone else, I feel so sad for them and worried about them. I understand now that they've been able to obtain birth certificates for the children, so that was a big, huge hurdle they needed to get over, and I'm so happy that one's been that they've been able to receive those.
Now, we've heard as part of this story that they weren't able to find a surrogate parent in Canada, and that's what precipitated their move to find someone through a clinic in Mexico. What do you think of that? I
think that's very sad. I practice surrogacy law almost exclusively. My entire practice is devoted to fertility law. So I can tell you that there's a good couple hundred surrogacies going on in Canada every single year. So although it's definitely a challenge to find a surrogate mother in Canada, it's not. It's nowhere near impossible. It's not. I'm sad for them that they chose to go abroad. I'm sorry for them if they didn't have access to better information. I can't imagine someone making the decision to go abroad for surrogacy when, in my opinion, surrogacy in Canada is so vibrant and really well done.
Okay, so tell me more about that. First of all, what are the laws here in Canada for surrogate mothers and people looking for surrogate mothers?
So the law in Canada is divided into 2 kind of different areas. There's first the general surrogacy law, which is federal law, and that law is the part that makes it kind of tough. So it makes it that you cannot pay a surrogate mother. You can only reimburse her for her expenses that are incurred as a result of her participation in the surrogacy. People think that means no one's going to be willing to be a surrogate. So if you don't have a sister or a best friend or a cousin, for example, who wants to be a surrogate for you, that you're not going to be able to find anyone else. But I do have to say, anecdotally, in my experience, that's not true. There are a lot of people, and you'd be surprised, there are a lot of people who are willing to do that for someone else. The other part of the law that you need to be aware of is provincially it is determined kind of who is a parent. And British Columbia in particular has some wonderful new legislation that came in just a couple of years back that makes surrogacy really just kind of quite a bit easier than it ever used to be.
Oh, in what way?
So surrogacy in British Columbia right now, instead of having to go through an entire parentage application where, you're kind of in front of a judge and trying to prove that the intended parents should actually be the legal parents and not the surrogate mother being a legal parent of the child, it's kind of almost a fast-track situation now, because what's happened is we've had, at least a decade here, maybe 2 decades already, of quite a bit of active surrogacy across Canada, and the judges have seen that the fear we used to have about women being taken advantage of, in Canada at least, in terms of being surrogate mothers, or surrogate moms changing their minds and deciding they want to keep the baby, those are, for the most part, really unfounded. It's just not something we see on a regular basis. So the judges have said, we no longer need to go through this entire huge legal process. We're comfortable that as long as the surrogate mother consents that this is not her child and that there was an agreement prior to this, and that kind of we don't think that anyone's being persuaded in an inappropriate way, we're willing to say that the intended parents are the parents and not the surrogate mother.
Okay, well, we do want to open up the discussion to our listeners. We'd like to hear what concerns, if any, you have about surrogacy. Would you consider being a surrogate mother yourself? Would you consider using a surrogate mother to have a child? The toll-free number around the province is 1-800-825-5950. In the Lower Mainland, the number is 604-669-3733. If you're on your cell phone, it's star or pound 690, or tweet us at BC Almanac. From Vancouver, we have Jilly on the line. Good afternoon to you.
Hi.
What are your thoughts on surrogacy?
I actually don't agree with it at all. I don't agree with it, not even a little bit. I think it's a reflection of the denial that people are in about just what they are given in life, and perhaps what they're given in life is not having children. And so or if they desperately need to have a child, then turn to adoption, because there's so many kids in the world that actually need families. So I think it's egotistical. I think it's a reflection of our society, and I don't support it.
Do you have children, Jilly?
I do, yeah.
Okay. Would you feel differently if perhaps you weren't able to conceive?
No. I actually was told that I would never be able to conceive, so it was an issue that I had to deal with personally, and then I did, and I considered it a bit of a miracle. But I was pretty accepting of the fact that I might not be able to. I've supported friends who've gone through different routes to have children of their own, and I can do that as a friend to support people, but as an individual in our society, I just look at it and think, this is crazy. It is so crazy.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing your thoughts, Jilly. Back to Sara Cohen now. I guess a big motivation for couples is they want perhaps a biological child.
That's true, but with respect to the comments made by the caller, you do have to recognize that a lot of my clients, for example, that are looking for surrogacy have been trying to adopt for a good 6 years, and they just can't get anywhere because, we live in a time where, for whatever reason, and there's many reasons, there aren't a lot of children locally available for adoption in the same way. So you're right, that a lot of surrogacy is motivated by people who want to have a genetic connection, but that's not always the case. Sometimes, there's people who maybe will not have a genetic connection, but are still choosing to be involved with surrogacy because maybe they don't have other options available to them, or they don't have other options available to them within kind of a more reasonable timeline.
Okay. What do you think about the current landscape in Canada? You described it as robust, certainly a short time ago, but there are some restrictions against paying surrogate mothers for their services here. Do you think Canada should change its laws?
That's a hard question. I do think that the part that's not difficult is, yes, I do think the laws need to be changed. In terms of how they need to be changed, that's the part that's a little bit trickier. I think Canada should definitely look at whether or not it's appropriate to pay surrogate mothers or not, because the current legislation we have was really kind of from a study that was done in the late 1980s, early 1990s, that was at a time when people looked at surrogacy and egg donation and sperm donation and all these things as kind of like, wow, the world gone wild, this is really scary, this is something we need to control. But like I was saying earlier, it's just no longer really, that's just not what we've seen actually happen. People have I think, largely been very, very responsible with this. We don't have kind of like we just none of the things that we worried about. Surrogate mothers don't tend to be people who are, low down on the social totem pole. It's I know some of my clients that choose to be surrogate mothers I have a veterinarian client right now who's doing this for a friend, or I have a teacher or hospital administrator. So there's, it's not like we're taking advantage of people anymore, and I don't think, or that we ever were. But what I'm trying to say is that fear didn't really ever come to fruition. So the laws do need to be changed to reflect reality as opposed to reflecting kind of this big unknown.
Okay, so the way things stand now is that the surrogate mothers cannot be paid outright, but you talked about expenses a little bit earlier on. So what can prospective parents pay for?
And this is where the law is very gray, and it's very difficult to practice law in this area because of it. When the Assisted Human Reproduction Act came out, it was supposed to rely on a large number of regulations, but no regulations except for one section were ever provided. So it makes it clear that the Act itself makes it clear that a surrogate may be reimbursed for any of her out-of-pocket expenses that she incurs as a result of the surrogacy, but then there are no regulations that set out what those are. So I can tell you what I do, but what I do might be different from what another lawyer does. So for me, the line really is, would the surrogate have incurred this expense otherwise? And if she would have incurred it, whether or not she's involved in a surrogacy, then it's inappropriate for the intended parents to reimburse her for it. But if it's something she's incurring only as a result of being involved in a surrogacy, so for example, maybe she needs prenatal vitamins, she needs maternity clothing, but also things about, transportation to the clinic, transportation to see an OB, what if she needs childcare when she's at the OB, things like that, I have no problem reimbursing. But for me, where I draw the line is, I won't allow my clients, or I won't advise them to reimburse something like the surrogate's rent, because she would have been paying rent regardless of whether or not she acts as a surrogate on behalf of the parents.
Okay, now for same-sex couples, finding a surrogate mother or adopting are some of the only options if they want to have children of their own, and both options pose particular challenges for queer parents. So to tell us about that, I'm joined now by Dara Parker. She is the Executive Director of Community, BC's Queer Resource Centre. Good afternoon, Dara.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you for joining the discussion. So give us a little window into the world of the queer community. What kinds of experiences have you heard when queer couples want a surrogate mother for their children?
It's a challenging, time-consuming, and expensive process, and often a very rewarding one. But I think the starting point is that when queer families start to build their family with children, it's always a much more deliberate process, and it's I'm finding becoming more and more sought after we're being sought after in terms of resources to help support that process, because it's not obvious in terms of how to navigate building your family.
Okay. What's it like when they decide to go overseas for options?
So I have some friends who chose that option, and one of the interesting things is that they often have to closet in order to pursue an international surrogacy. So I've got two gay male friends who live in Vancouver, and they chose that option because it was less expensive in the long run, and they went to India to identify a surrogate mother using one of the husband's sperm. However, he had to identify as a single parent choosing to do this, because they knew that, according to law in India, they wouldn't be allowed to pursue a surrogacy as a gay couple.
Okay, so how about within Canada's boundaries then? How have some of them managed to find a surrogate mother here?
So here it's not illegal, of course, to be a gay couple pursuing surrogacy. It's just very difficult to identify the right person. So there are some agencies locally that will help gay couples identify a surrogate, but I was just speaking to some friends who pursued that route, worked with an agency for 9 months, and then after 9 months of working with a potential candidate, that fell through, which can be an emotionally exhausting process. It can be expensive. You have to also go through, in terms of why it takes so long and why it is expensive, you have to test the sperm. There's a 6-month holding period to ensure that the sperm are viable and healthy, that they don't have STDs attached to them, that you're not risking either the health of the surrogate or the child. And of course, as you just heard from your previous guest, you can't pay a surrogate directly, and so I think that makes it quite challenging to identify the right person to be a surrogate for a queer family.
Okay. How much interest would you say in general is there from queer couples to have children today?
We're getting more and more requests at community to help support in terms of information, referrals on how to navigate this process. Recently, there was a workshop held in Vancouver 2 months ago for prospective queer parents on how to build a family, and there was over 50 people in attendance and a big outcry for more support, more information, and more resources.
Dara, we really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye. Dara Parker is the Executive Director of Community, BC's Queer Resource Centre. I want to bounce this off Sara Cohen. I know we have a few calls lined up here. She is a surrogacy lawyer and partner at Fertility Law Canada. Comments specifically on gay and lesbian couples, Sara?
So I would say that male same-sex couples make up a very large percentage of the intended parents that are seeking surrogacy. And that's not to say that lesbian couples aren't also seeking surrogacy, but, hopefully between them there's a functioning uterus or, they have the physical ability to carry a baby. But obviously gay males don't have that option available to them. So there's a really big push these days.
Okay. I want to go back to the lines now. We have Stephen on the line from Vancouver. Good afternoon. Welcome to BC Almanac.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I myself and my wife had fertility issues for many years. We had tried for 10 years through surrogacy, and I'd just like to say we finally were successful 17 months ago.
Oh, congratulations. Boy or girl?
We had a beautiful baby boy.
Wonderful. So where did you go? I mean, was this in Canada or was this outside of Canadian borders?
This was. We actually ended up finding a surrogate through an agency in Ontario. And I think as one of your previous guests had said, our surrogate was very well educated. She's actually a school teacher, and she had been a surrogate twice before. And she also herself has 4 children.
Wow. Stephen, what was the whole experience like for you? Was it frustrating? Were there enough resources as you were making your search?
Resources were very difficult to find. I personally find it was very difficult to find. As your very first caller had stated, she was adamantly against surrogacy, and we find that there's a lot of that attitude. And it just, to me, seems like a lot of the resources are underground. You know what I mean?
Explain that a little bit more.
That it just seems to be that there's a stigma attached to infertile couples. That if they go to surrogacy, it's like a last-ditch effort rather than going the route of adoption. I will tell you, in our 10 years, we had two failures with surrogacy, and we did try the adoption route.
What do you mean by failure?
Where the embryo failed to take into the surrogacy, yes. So it ended up as a miscarriage.
I see. Okay, yeah. I thought you were saying someone changed their mind or something. At
the end. No.
Okay.
We found, as far as the surrogates in the agencies, we had nothing but a positive experience.
Okay. Another question: do you have any relationship or contact with the woman who carried your baby?
We do. She had become a very dear friend.
Okay. And what do you plan to tell your child about this experience, or do you?
Yes, of course we will. We will be very honest and explain to him that his mother was not able to carry him, but our dear friend helped us out.
Okay, Stephen, we really appreciate you calling in today. That's a perspective I was hoping to hear, so thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Marika is on the line from Prince George. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm just calling because I think that there is a bit of a glamorization with surrogacy. Going back to the Friends episode where Phoebe decides to be a surrogate mother, I was a teenager at the time when I saw that episode, and I just thought, wow, that's so amazing. And it is amazing because now that I'm 31, and I've had 2 of my own children, and I'm thankful for them. But it was hard being pregnant, really hard. So I think that for people wanting to explore surrogacy as an option, as well as being a surrogate mother, it's a huge undertaking. pregnancy, you have no idea what the outcome is going to be as far as risks for your health, whether the baby will, live through the pregnancy, whether you will live through the pregnancy. I mean, I was healthy. I was really sick a lot of the time, but ultimately I had vaginal birth, and I was fine in the end, but it was hard work. And so I just think that it's not something to take lightly. It's not something to be glamorized. And I just would want to issue a warning to women who have never born a child before that although you might be the healthiest person alive, you're giving your body for 10 months, up to 10 months, let's say, if it all goes well, and it could be potentially life-changing. And so that is a big thing to consider.
That is really an important point to consider. Marika, thank you very, very much. And I want to put that to Sara Cohen now, who is a specialist in this, surrogacy lawyer. Do you have issues like this with your client, that they might be coming in thinking, oh, this will be kind of an interesting little journey for a while? What kind of advice would you give?
I think that actually the caller did a great job talking about the fact that, this isn't for everyone. And the most important step here for a surrogate, if someone's thinking about being a surrogate, is really getting some great medical advice before you proceed. Because, of course, there are risks. Without a doubt, you're undertaking a risk on behalf of somebody else. And you need to make sure you understand that, and you need to get the best advice available to you. And that's one of the reasons why I'd really like to see Canadians staying in Canada, because I have a lot of trust in our medical system. That, not only is a surrogate, if she's a resident of Canada, she has her own health insurance, but our quality of our clinics are very, very good here. Okay, which obvious risks when you're going out of country, because you don't have the same controls necessarily. Exactly. We have Yael on the line from Penticton in the Okanagan. Welcome to BC Almanac. Hello.
Hi there.
Hi. What are your thoughts on the surrogacy issue?
Well, firstly, I just wanted to say that anything that I say is absolutely not a personal attack towards the family who is in, was it Burnaby they were in, did you say?
Maple Ridge, I believe.
Maple Ridge, yeah. My heart goes out to them. Yeah. I mean, they deserve to have a family if that's what they desire. I fully believe that. But what I want to address is something surrounding the way that people of privilege go about it. So just this idea of heading abroad and using women's bodies as sort of consumption. And I just feel like there's a conversation that's not being had, and I'm a little bit appalled that it's not being spoken about at all, just about the women's bodies being used as consumption abroad and people of privilege searching by marginalized populations, and we need to maybe perhaps consider that relationship dynamic, that power hierarchy that's playing out, as well as, what's happening with this woman now in Mexico. We don't know what her health costs have incurred, what her emotional work was involved, and where she's at as well. And I would just like to address that and maybe think about if people who are listening today could really kind of just delve into that conversation a little bit. And again, I have compassion for the people involved, and I'm just concerned that we're not speaking about the power imbalance that's at play. So. Okay, no, I understand your point, and we can make assumptions as well because it's in Mexico that they may be underprivileged. This is apparently a legitimate surrogacy clinic in Mexico. So is your assumption then that a woman in Canada who agrees to become a surrogate mother would be in a much different circumstance than a Mexican woman? I absolutely believe that. Okay, well, thank you for bringing up that point, Yael. Sara Cohen, your thoughts on that? I think Yael has that perfectly accurately. I think, it's not for me to say why a woman in India or why a woman in Mexico chooses to do this. I think she may have some very legitimate reasons to do this, but I think there's a clear power imbalance, and I think we can protect people much better in a situation in Canada where we're going to require things like a psychological assessment. We're going to know that she has proper health insurance. We're going to, we're not seeing surrogates who kind of are at the lower echelons of society, whatever that means. I do have major concerns about Western countries kind of seeking services in developing nations.
And I do have to say that surrogacy in Canada is so much about whether or not you already knew the person. It becomes very much about developing a relationship. And the story we heard from the other caller who recently had a baby born through surrogacy is very typical. That's exactly what I see day in and day out. It's people looking to build a kind of helping someone else build a family.
Right.
And they continue to have a relationship, and this is something that they're very proud of, and it's not a surprise to the child. The child always is brought up knowing this. It's not a woman that they can't contact. It's not
Sarah, we're running out of time. The clock is literally running down as you speak. You have been such an incredible resource on this story. I'm so glad you were available for this discussion today. Thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye for now. Sara Cohen is a surrogacy lawyer and partner at Fertility Law Canada in Toronto.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.